We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Vav Amid Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 56a. On the previous Amid, the Gemara brought a Tosefta. The Tosefta said that a person is not allowed to use the money of Meiser Sheni and buy animals outside of Yerushalayim. And the Tosefta continues, V'im lokach b'shogeg, if he does do that, if he purchases them by mistake, yachzeru domim l'makomam, then the money should return to their place. B'mezid, but if he does it on purpose, tala, he should bring it up, v'tochal b'makom, and he should eat it in its place. And Rashi explains, b'shogeg means shelo yoda shehin mos meiser sheni. If he didn't realize, he didn't know that the money he was using was the money of meiser sheni, yachzeru domim l'makomam, the money should return to their place, meaning kofin hamocher lahachzir hadomim, we force the seller to return the money to mekach tosu, because it's a mistaken purchase. She'ilu yoda shehin mos meiser sheni, but mos meiser rather, if he had known that it was money of meiser, lo hayalokcha, he wouldn't have bought the animal. The trichale milsa loholichel Yerushalayim, because it's a burden, it's a bother to take this animal all the way up to Yerushalayim. He didn't realize he was using the money of meiser sheni to buy this animal, and now the animal needs to be taken up to Yerushalayim. Uvemos havanichale lam to yinu. If he had realized that it's money of meiser sheni, he would have preferred to bring the money up to Yerushalayim. And so therefore, again, if the buyer gave the seller this money of meiser sheni, we say that the seller has to give the money back, and the sale is retracted. B'makom, but then it said that let's say he does it on purpose, so then he has to bring it up and eat it. B'makom means b'Yerushalayim, he has to bring the animals up, consume them in Yerushalayim. Tichsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, El hamakom asher yivchar v'gomer, it says to the place. Yerushalayim is called the makom. And the Gemara continues, the Tosefta continues, Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, B'amed zavarim amurim, when is this true? B'miskavein v'lokach tchila l'shem shlamim. That's when he has intention and he buys it originally l'shem shlamim, that it should be a carbon shlamim. Avol b'miskavein l'hotzi mos meiser sheni l'chulin. But let's say his intention is that he wants to take the money of meiser sheni and he wants them to go out l'chulin. Bein shogeg, bein mezid, then it doesn't make a difference whether it's b'shogeg, whether it's b'mezid, whether it's by mistake or on purpose. Yachzeru damim l'makomam, the money has to return, meaning to say the money returns to its place to the seller. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda says, we're going on the case of Mezid again. It said that if he purchases the animal b'mezid, so then he brings it up and he eats it in Yerushalayim, that's only true if he purchases it l'shem shlamim, to be a carbon shlamim, shekein derech kol behemos shenichos bekesef meiser. That's the halacha with all animals that are bought with the money of meiser sheni l'karev shlamim. They're supposed to be brought as a carbon shlamim. Kidi alfinan lo b'menachas sham sham v'zavachta shlamim v'yachalta sham uva meiser ksev v'yachalta sham. We learn it out from it says sham by the carbon shlamim, it says sham by meiser sheni, and we learn out that you should purchase the animal for the purpose of that animal being a carbon shlamim. However, let's say he had kavana that he wanted the money to be used to go lechulin, meaning lechulin shalokcha laoch lachutz lamakom. He bought it, he was going to eat it outside of the proper place, he wasn't going to eat it in Yerushalayim. So then bein shogeg lava miskaven lhotzi lechulin koi. Rashi points out this line where it says whether it's b'shogeg, whether it's b'mezid, so yachzru damim lemakom. So when it says shogeg over here, that's not going on the case where he has intention lahotzi lechulin. Dim kain lav shogeg, because if he had intention, so then that's not a mistake. The whole case of a mistake is he doesn't even realize that it's money of meiser sheni. So in other words, when it says b'shogeg, we know anyways the halach is yachzeru damim l'makomam, means to say b'mezid, in a situation where he's miskaven that the most meiser sheni should go lechulin b'mezid, so then yachzeru damim l'makomam. V'hai miskaven to katani amezid koi. When it says miskaven that he has this intention that it should go lechulin, that's going on the case where he does it on purpose. V'hachi kamar. This is how you understand the Tosefta. Avolocha l'shem chulin. Let's say he buys it for the purpose of chulin. He's not buying it that it should be a carbon shlamim. The mezid didei miskavin lahotzi meiser lechulinu. In that case, the mezid is, the intention is that he wants it to be that the meiser turns to chulin. So then, bein shogeg, bein mezid, yachzeru damim l'makomam. Whether it's b'shogeg, whether it's b'mezid, then the money goes back to its place, and you divide up each case appropriately. Shogeg, in the case where it's a mistake, misham the mekach tos. So there, it's a situation of a mekach tos. He didn't even realize that he was spending the money of meiser sheni. As we said above, it's a mekach tos. The money's returned to the seller has to return the money. Umezid, in the situation of b'mezid, to kansinon lei lamocher. So in that situation, when he did it on purpose, and it was for the purpose again of buying this animal not to be a carbon shlamim, so then the mocher has to return the money. It's a fine on the mocher, kedamar lekamon, as we say later on, delav ach b'ragonav elachor ragonav. We say it's not the mouse that steals, it is the hole that steals. That's going to be discussed later on. But the Gemara continues, V'anon tanan, but didn't we learn in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, B'mezid, let's say a person on purpose uses money of Meiser Sheni for Kiddushin, so then Kiddush, so then it is a good Kiddushin. And Rashi explains, B'mezid Kiddush, if he does it on purpose, it's a good Kiddushin. The Kevan Delekatos, because since there was no mistake over here, they were all aware that money of Meiser Sheni was being used. Mishum Kenasa Lo Amri Rabbanan Delivtol. We don't say, the Rabbanan don't say that there's a fine in this situation, and we're mevatel the Kiddushin, and that contradicts what the Tosefta said, because in the case of the Tosefta, b'mezid, the person used the money of Meiser Sheni on this animal outside of Yerushalayim, and the intention was not that the animal should be a korban shlomim, the intention was that it should be lechulin, and we say that we impose a fine in that case. We say the sale does not go through, and the seller has to return the money. And so over here in our situation of Kiddushin, why do we say that the kinyan is effective? Why do we say that the Kiddushin is in fact a good Kiddushin? And the Gemara answers to that. Amar Rebbe Elazar says, when it comes to Kiddushin, it's different. Isha Yodas, a woman knows she'in mos Meiser Sheni mischalin al yoda, that this money of Meiser Sheni is not going to become chulin through her. Va'ola v'ochalta b'Yerushalayim, when she accepts this money for Kiddushin purposes, she actually takes this money up and she eats it, she uses it in Yerushalayim, she consumes it, so to speak, in Yerushalayim, and therefore in this case, we do not impose a fine. And Rashi explains, Amar Rebbe Elazar says, Masnisin leko lemiknasei klal, there's no reason to impose a fine in the case in our Mishnah, the isha yodas v'chulu, because the woman knows, meaning, v'lo niskavna lahotzio l'chulin, she has no intention to take this money of Meiser Sheni and make it into chulin, not treat it as money of Meiser Sheni. Avol mocher ze yodea, but the seller, he knows, shahamos mischalos ala behema, that the money is going to, the kedusha is going to go onto the animal, v'chulin hein biyado, and that money is now chulin in his hand, v'avar lifnei iver lo sitin michshol, and he's transgressing the yisur of lifnei iver. Why? Diodea shalokech miskavin loch labiro, because he knows that the buyer, his intention is to eat it in his city, not to bring it up into Yerushalayim, and not to bring it as a korban shlomim. And so therefore, in the case of that sale of the animal, we impose a fine and we say the sale is retracted. Masha ein kain, we don't say that when it comes to the case of Kiddushin. And the Gemara continues, Maskif lo Rabbi Yirmiyah asks the following question, what about a situation where a person uses money of Meiser Sheni to buy a behema tmeya, a non-kosher animal, or slaves or land? The Adam Yodea, because a person knows in that case, she'ein mos Meiser Sheni mischalin alein, that the money of Meiser Sheni does not become chulin through buying those items. Utanan, and yet we learn in the Mishnah, ein lochem behema tmeya avodim v'karkos b'mos Meiser Sheni, we're not allowed to buy behema tmeya avodim and karkos with the money of Meiser Sheni, afilu b'Yerushalayim, even in Yerushalayim. V'im lokach, and in this case, if a person does use the money of Meiser Sheni to buy behema tmeya avodim and karkos, yochal connecton, so the buyer actually has to designate other money corresponding to the amount he spent and treat that money like money of Meiser Sheni. And Rashi explains, Vare behema tmeya de adam yodeya, meaning to say, the ikol amemer, when it comes to the money of Meiser Sheni used, let's say, to buy a behema tmeya, we can say, ki shakel lehu lemos, when the seller takes that money from the buyer, adaita lasukino lirushalayim shakel lehu, it's just like when the woman takes the money for Kiddushin, he's taking that money with the understanding that he's going to bring that money up to Yerushalayim and spend it in Yerushalayim. And yet over there, in that case, we don't say that the sale simply goes through, we do impose a fine in that case. Utanan, we said in the Mishnah, Yochal kenegdon halokeach yikach mos mishalo, that the buyer in that case has to take his own money. V'yomer, he has to say, Kol mokom shamos biad mocher, whatever the money is right now in the hands of the seller, Yehu mechulalos alelu, that kedusha should be redeemed onto this money. V'yalim v'yochlim Yerushalayim, and he should go and take it up and use that money in Yerushalayim. And so you see, we're not treating it the same as we treat the money of Kiddushin. Again, by the Kiddushin, we say that the Kiddushin actually is effective, and the woman just takes the money and she uses it in Yerushalayim. So why is it different by Kiddushin? And the Gemara says, Ella, rather, hach over here, Be'isha chaveira askinan, we're talking about a woman who's a chaveira, she knows the halacha, the yada, so since she knows the halacha, this becomes an exceptional situation. And Rashi explains, Ella masnisin bisha chaveira askinan the yada, our Mishnah is talking about an isha chaveira, she knows shein Meiser Sheni meschal al yedei kiddusha, she knows the Meiser Sheni doesn't become chulin through the kiddushin that she receives, v'ola v'ochaltan, she'll she'll take that money and she'll use it again in Yerushalayim, and that's why the Kiddushin works, and there's no knas that's imposed in that case. Aval stam mocher, but in a situation of a regular seller, lo yada shein meiser mischal al behemoth mei, he doesn't know what happens with this money. He doesn't know that the Kiddush of the meiser sheni is not mischal on a behemoth mei, and that's why in that situation the buyer has to designate other money corresponding to the amount of money that he gave to the seller, and he has to say the Kiddush of that money goes on this money, and again take that money up to Yerushalayim. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, we just said above, Im lokach yochal kenegdan, again, if the person buys with the money of Meiser Sheni a behemoth meya, so then the buyer has to take money corresponding to the amount of money that he gave to the seller, and he has to say the kedusha of that money that I gave to the seller goes on this money, and use that money in Yerushalayim. And so the Gemara asks, V'amai, now why is that the halacha? Yachzru damav l'mekomam, why don't we say the halacha should be the same as if he buys a behemoth tahora, where we said that in that situation, the sale is actually retracted, the money goes back to its place. Ki hasam, just like over there, just like we say by behemoth tahora, we should say the same thing by behemoth tameya. And the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel says, and Rashi says, Ki hasam kedamran, just like we said above, Gabe lokeach behemoth tahora b'mezid. If a person uses the animal to buy a behemoth tahora b'mezid, again, then we said that in that situation of b'mezid, the money returns to its place. Why don't we say the same thing over here? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis.